Subscribe now and press the bell icon so you never miss an emotional story that touches your heart. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard as captain. Marcus stood at attention outside the royal palace. His uniform was pristine, his posture perfect, just as it had been for the past 15 years of service. The palace gates gleamed in the early light, and tourists gathered nearby, snapping photographs of the guards who stood like statues. Marcus had seen it all before. Thousands of faces passed by him each day, and he had trained himself to look through them rather than at them. That morning started like any other. The changing of the guard happened at precisely 8 o'clock. The morning shift took their positions while the night guards marched away in perfect formation. Marcus took his place at the main entrance, his hand resting on the ceremonial sword at his side. He focused his gaze on the distant fountain, letting his mind settle into the familiar rhythm of his duty. Around mid-morning, a small figure appeared at the edge of his vision. A boy, no more than 10 years old, stood at the base of the palace steps. His clothes were worn and dirty, his face smudged with dust. The child's shoes had holes in them, and his shirt hung loosely on his thin frame. Marcus noticed but did not move. Street children often wandered near the palace, hoping for coins from generous tourists. The boy did not approach the tourists. Instead, he walked directly toward Marcus, his small feet making soft sounds on the stone steps. Marcus remained still, his eyes fixed ahead. The boy stopped just a few feet away, looking up at the tall guard with wide, hopeful eyes. Minutes passed. The child did not move. He simply stood there, waiting. Marcus felt the weight of the boy's gaze, but maintained his stance. It was against protocol to break position or engage with civilians during duty. The boy shifted from foot to foot, his hands clasped together nervously. Still, Marcus did not acknowledge him. More minutes ticked by. The boy's presence became harder to ignore. Other guards glanced over, curious about the small visitor who refused to leave. Finally, the boy spoke. His voice was quiet, trembling with emotion. "Sir, please, I need your help." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he did not respond. The training was clear. Do not break formation. Do not engage. The boy continued, his words coming faster now. "My mother is sick. Very sick. The doctors say she needs medicine, but we have no money. I have tried everything. I sold newspapers. I cleaned shoes. I begged in the markets. But it is not enough." The child's voice cracked, and Marcus saw tears beginning to form in the boy's eyes. "Please, sir. I do not know what else to do. Everyone tells me the guards at the palace are the bravest and kindest men in the kingdom. They say if anyone can help, it would be you." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "This is the prescription. The medicine costs more than I can ever earn. I thought maybe you could help me, or maybe you know someone who could." Marcus felt something stir inside his chest, but he forced it down. He had a duty to perform. Breaking protocol could mean discipline or even dismissal. The boy held out the paper, his hand shaking. When Marcus did not take it, the boy's shoulders slumped. Tears now rolled freely down his dirty cheeks. "I understand," the boy whispered. "You have important work to do. I should not have bothered you." But the child did not leave. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone watching. The boy dropped to his knees on the hard stone steps. He pressed his small hands together in a pleading gesture and looked up at Marcus with desperate eyes. "Please, sir, I am begging you. Arrest me if you must. Take me to jail, lock me up. I do not care. But please, before you do, please help my mother. She is all I have in this world. Without her, I have nothing. I will do anything. I will accept any punishment. Just please help her." The courtyard fell silent. Tourists stopped taking pictures. Other guards turned their heads slightly, watching the scene unfold. The boy remained on his knees, his thin body trembling with emotion. "I heard that sometimes prisoners get food and shelter," the boy continued, his voice breaking. "If I go to jail, at least I will not be a burden to my mother anymore. Maybe then she can use what little money we have for her medicine instead of feeding me. Please, sir, arrest me. It is the only way I can help her." Marcus felt his heart pounding in his chest. His hands, usually so steady, began to tremble slightly. The boy's words cut through his training, through his discipline, through everything he thought he knew about duty. Here was a child willing to sacrifice his freedom, his future, everything, just to save his mother. The pure love and desperation in that small voice shook something deep within Marcus's soul. He had faced danger in his military career. He had stood firm against threats and chaos. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. For this small boy whose courage and love were greater than anything Marcus had ever witnessed. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing, while his body remained perfectly still. The boy continued kneeling on the cold stone steps, his small frame shaking with silent sobs. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. Tourists watched with concerned faces. Some pulled out their phones, recording the emotional scene. Other guards maintained their positions, but their eyes betrayed their inner conflict. Marcus had joined the Royal Guard when he was 20 years old. Back then, he was filled with dreams of honor and service. His father had been a guard before him, and his grandfather before that. The uniform meant everything to his family. It represented dignity, duty, and unwavering commitment to the crown. For 15 years, Marcus had lived by the rules. He had never questioned an order. He had never broken formation. He had been the model soldier, but now, looking down at this child who was willing to throw away his freedom for love, Marcus felt something crack inside the walls he had built around his heart. He thought about his own mother, who had passed away 5 years earlier. He remembered sitting by her bedside in the hospital, holding her hand, feeling utterly helpless. He had money then. He had resources. He could afford the best doctors, the best care, yet even with all that, he could not save her. The pain of that loss still haunted him in quiet moments. This boy had none of those advantages. No money, no resources, no powerful connections. All he had was love and a desperate willingness to sacrifice everything for the person who mattered most. Marcus felt his throat tighten. His carefully maintained composure began to waver. The boy looked up at him one more time, his eyes red and swollen from crying. "Please," the child whispered again. "I am not afraid of jail. I am only afraid of losing her." Something inside Marcus broke. His hands, which had been clenched tightly at his sides, slowly relaxed. His rigid posture softened just slightly. He took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to do could cost him everything he had worked for. But in that moment, Marcus realized that some things mattered more than rules. Some moments demanded humanity over protocol. Some hearts needed to be heard more than regulations needed to be followed. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus broke his stance. He moved for the first time in hours, and the small movement sent ripples through the watching crowd. He bent down, his knees touching the stone beside the boy. Face to face now, Marcus looked into the child's tear-stained eyes. He reached out and gently placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. The child flinched slightly, surprised by the touch, by the warmth in the gesture. "What is your name, son?" Marcus asked, his voice soft but clear. The boy blinked in surprise, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "Daniel, sir. My name is Daniel." Marcus nodded slowly. "Daniel, listen to me carefully. You are not going to jail. You have done nothing wrong. In fact, you have done something incredibly brave. You love your mother so much that you are willing to give up everything for her. That is not a crime. That is the most honorable thing I have ever witnessed." Daniel's eyes widened in confusion and hope. "But sir, the medicine. My mother needs help. I have nowhere else to turn. I have asked everyone. The neighbors have no money. The charity offices say they have too many people waiting. The hospital says they cannot give medicine without payment. I do not know what else to do." Marcus squeezed the boy's shoulder gently. "You are going to stand up now. You are going to take my hand, and you are going to come with me." Fear flashed across Daniel's face. "Are you arresting me after all?" Marcus shook his head. "No, Daniel. I am helping you. I am going to do everything in my power to make sure your mother gets the medicine she needs." The boy's mouth opened in shock. But how? Why? You do not even know me, Marcus smiled. The first genuine smile he had allowed himself in months. Because once, a long time ago, I sat beside my own mother's hospital bed. I know what it feels like to watch someone you love suffer. I know what it means to feel helpless. And because today, you reminded me why I became a guard in the first place. Not to stand like a statue, but to protect and serve people who need help. Marcus stood up, extending his hand to Daniel. The boy hesitated for just a moment before placing his small, dirty hand in Marcus's large, gloved one. Marcus pulled him gently to his feet. The crowd around them began to murmur with approval. Some people clapped softly. Others wiped tears from their own eyes. Marcus turned to his fellow guards stationed nearby. Lieutenant Peters, I am taking a brief leave. Personal emergency. Please inform the captain. Peters, a younger guard who had watched the entire scene unfold, nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Take all the time you need. Marcus knew he would face questions later. There would be paperwork. There might be consequences. But none of that mattered now. He looked down at Daniel, who was staring up at him with an expression of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. Where is your mother now? Marcus asked. At home, sir. We live in the old quarter near the textile factory. She is too weak to get out of bed. Marcus nodded, his mind already forming a plan. Show me the prescription. Daniel quickly pulled out the crumpled paper from his pocket. Marcus took it, studying the medication name and dosage. It was expensive, but not impossibly so. More importantly, it was something that could be obtained quickly if one knew where to go and had the means to pay. We are going to get this medicine right now, Marcus said firmly. Then we are going to take it to your mother. After that, we are going to make sure she sees a proper doctor. The police station was nothing like the comfortable, air-conditioned hotels Trevor was accustomed to. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the worn furniture and scuffed floors. Trevor sat on a hard bench, still in handcuffs, watching as officers processed paperwork related to his arrest. The reality of his situation was finally beginning to penetrate his consciousness, though he still seemed to believe that somehow his wealth or status would extract him from this mess. Officer Tricia Reynolds was assigned to handle Trevor's case. She was a 15-year veteran of the force, known for her thoroughness and her complete lack of patience for entitled behavior. She had seen countless tourists get themselves into trouble through disrespect and poor judgment. But this case particularly annoyed her. The video evidence made it absolutely clear that Trevor had deliberately assaulted a guard who was simply doing his job with dignity and polite professionalism. After the initial processing, Trevor was allowed one phone call. He immediately contacted his lawyer back home, a man named Richard Burton, who specialized in corporate law and had helped Trevor navigate various business disputes over the years. Richard listened to Trevor's panicked explanation, asked several pointed questions, and then delivered news that Trevor did not want to hear. Richard was not licensed to practice law in this jurisdiction, knew nothing about international criminal law, and strongly recommended that Trevor hire a local attorney immediately. Furthermore, Richard warned that this incident could have serious implications for Trevor's business, reputation, and personal life. Trevor's hands shook as he hung up the phone. For the first time in years, possibly decades, he felt completely out of control. He could not bully his way through this. He could not buy his way out. He could not simply ignore it and hope it would disappear. The legal system was moving forward with or without his cooperation, and social media had already convicted him in the court of public opinion. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Marcus had returned to duty after cleaning up and filing his official statement. His fellow guards expressed their support, some with words, others with respectful nods. Captain Harrison personally thanked Marcus for maintaining his composure under such disrespectful circumstances. The incident had reinforced why their training was so rigorous, why discipline mattered, and why they took their roles so seriously. The palace administration held an emergency meeting to discuss the incident and its aftermath. The director of operations, Margaret Chun, reviewed the security footage and the social media response. She noted that while the incident was unfortunate, The professional handling by Marcus and the security team had actually generated positive publicity for the palace. People around the world were praising the guards and expressing support for stricter enforcement of visitor conduct rules. Margaret drafted a public statement that was released within hours of the incident. The statement expressed gratitude for the global support shown to Marcus and all palace guards. It confirmed that the individual involved had been arrested and charged, that the palace took visitor conduct extremely seriously, and that future violations would be handled with similar firmness. The statement also thanked the many respectful tourists who visited the palace each year and helped preserve its dignity and historical significance. The statement went viral almost immediately, receiving hundreds of thousands of supportive comments. News outlets picked up the story, and it began appearing on television broadcasts and news websites around the world. The headline variations all told essentially the same story, entitled "Tourist Learns Hard Lesson After Mocking Guard." Some outlets identified Trevor by name, others showed blurred images, but the narrative was consistent. This was a cautionary tale about respect, consequences, and the importance of understanding that actions have repercussions. Clarissa, meanwhile, had checked into a different hotel and was seriously reconsidering her relationship with Trevor. She had witnessed his arrogant behavior for months, always making excuses or minimizing his rudeness, but this incident had crossed a line. She felt humiliated to have been associated with him, angry that he had ruined what should have been a pleasant vacation, and genuinely sympathetic toward the guard who had been disrespected. That evening, she posted her own statement on social media, apologizing for not intervening more forcefully and making it clear that she did not condone Trevor's actions. Her post generated significant attention, with many people praising her for speaking out and distancing herself from Trevor's behavior. Some suggested she could have done more to stop him beforehand, while others recognized that confronting someone exhibiting such aggressive entitlement was not always easy or safe. Regardless, Clarissa's statement made it clear that she was a separate individual with her own values, not simply an extension of Trevor's ego. At the police station, Trevor was eventually assigned a local attorney named Sophia Martinez. Sophia was known for her competence and her no-nonsense approach to clients. When she met Trevor for the first time, she did not offer sympathy or reassurance. Instead, she laid out the facts clearly. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Video footage from multiple angles showed him deliberately assaulting a guard. Witness statements supported the video evidence. His attempt to bribe officers had added another serious charge. He was looking at potential jail time, substantial fines, and a criminal record that would follow him internationally. Sophia explained that his best option was to plead guilty, express genuine remorse, and hope for leniency from the judge. Fighting the charges would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately futile given the evidence. Trevor protested that he had not meant any real harm. It was just a stupid prank, that surely the punishment did not fit the crime. Sophia cut him off firmly. Intent did not erase the action. Minimizing his behavior would not help. The legal system cared about what he did, not what he meant to do. Trevor spent that night in a holding cell, sharing space with several other individuals who had also made poor choices. The cell was cold, the bed was uncomfortable, and the reality of his situation kept him awake most of the night. He thought about his business, his reputation, his future. He thought about the moment when he bought that ice cream cone, when he thought it would be funny to mock a guard. He wondered why he had not simply walked away, why he had felt the need to be the center of attention, why his judgment had failed so completely. The next morning, Trevor appeared before a judge for his initial hearing. The courtroom was formal and intimidating, nothing like the boardrooms where Trevor usually wielded power. The judge, a woman named Honor Beatrice Walsh, had a reputation for fairness, but also for having zero tolerance for disrespectful behavior. She reviewed the charges, watched portions of the video evidence, and listened to the prosecutor's summary of the case. When asked how he pleaded, Trevor hesitated. Sophia had advised him to plead guilty, but his pride still resisted the idea of admitting wrongdoing so publicly. He looked around the courtroom, saw the stern expression on the judge's face, saw his attorney's warning look. and finally spoke the word that tasted like ashes in his mouth. Guilty, Judge Walsh. Set bail at an amount that was substantial even for someone of Trevor's means. She also imposed strict conditions. Trevor was not to leave the country until his sentencing hearing. He was banned from the palace and all other historic sites in the region. He was required to attend counseling sessions addressing entitlement and respect for others. Violation of any condition would result in immediate arrest and increased charges. As Trevor left the courtroom, journalists were waiting. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust toward him. Questions were shouted. Sophia guided him quickly to a waiting car, but not before several clear photos were captured. These images would join the viral videos, creating a complete narrative of consequence and humiliation. Marcus looked at the small apartment around him, taking in the full reality of Daniel and his mother's situation. The walls showed water damage from old leaks. A single bare bulb provided light. In the corner, he noticed a small camping stove, the kind people used when they could not afford proper cooking facilities. There was a bucket in the corner for water. This was not just about medicine. This was about survival itself. Daniel carefully opened the medication bottles and read the instructions with surprising skill for a 10-year-old. He had clearly educated himself about his mother's condition. He filled a cup with water from the bucket and brought it to her bedside. His mother took the first dose of medicine, her hands shaking as she swallowed the pills. She lay back against the pillow, exhausted from even that small effort. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. Daniel and his mother watched him with curious expressions. "Hello, Dr. Ramirez. This is Captain Marcus from the Palace Guard. Yes, I know it has been a long time. I need a favor. I have a patient who needs immediate attention. Can you make a house call today? I understand you are busy, but this is urgent. I will cover all costs personally." There was a pause as he listened. "Thank you. I am sending you the address now." "Yes, I will be here." Daniel's mother tried to protest. "Sir, please. You have already done so much. We cannot ask for more. A doctor's visit costs money we do not have." Marcus sat down on the edge of a wooden chair that creaked under his weight. "You are not asking. I am offering. Your son walked to the palace this morning and showed more dignity and courage than I have seen in years. The least I can do is make sure you receive proper medical care." While they waited for the doctor, Marcus learned more about their situation. Daniel's mother, whose name was Maria, had been a seamstress in a textile factory. 6 months ago, she had started feeling weak and dizzy. At first, she ignored the symptoms, continuing to work because they needed the income. Eventually, she collapsed at the factory. The hospital diagnosed her with a serious blood condition that required expensive medication and regular monitoring. Without treatment, her health would continue to decline. The factory had let her go and she became too ill to work consistently. They offered no compensation, no assistance. Maria and Daniel had been surviving on the small amount of money Daniel could earn, doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. He delivered groceries for elderly people. He ran errands for shopkeepers. He collected recyclable materials to sell. Everything he earned went toward food and rent. There was never enough left over for medicine. Marcus listened to their story, his jaw tightening with anger at the injustice of it all. Here was a woman who had worked hard her entire life, a boy who was forced to grow up too fast because the system had failed them. "What about Daniel's father?" Marcus asked gently. Maria's expression grew sad. "He died 4 years ago. Construction accident. The company gave us a small payment, but it ran out long ago. Since then, it has been just Daniel and me." Daniel sat on the floor beside his mother's bed, holding her hand. Despite everything, there was love in this small apartment. The boy looked at his mother with such devotion, and she looked back at him with pride mixed with guilt. Marcus could see she blamed herself for their situation, even though none of it was her fault. She had tried her best, worked hard, and played by the rules. Sometimes, that was not enough in an unfair world. Dr. Ramirez arrived about an hour later. He was an older man with kind eyes and gentle hands. Marcus had served with his son in the military years ago, and they had maintained a friendship. The doctor examined Maria thoroughly, asking questions and making notes. Daniel watched anxiously, trying to understand everything the doctor said. After the examination, Dr. Ramirez pulled Marcus's aside. "Her condition is serious but treatable," the doctor explained in a low voice. "The medication you purchased today was exactly what she needed. However, she is severely malnourished and dehydrated. Her body has been struggling without proper nutrition. She needs rest, regular meals, and ongoing medical care. With consistent treatment, she should recover within a few months. But she cannot work during this time. She needs to focus entirely on getting better." Marcus nodded, his mind already working through solutions. What will the ongoing costs be? Dr. Ramirez pulled out a calculator and did some quick math. The medication will need to be purchased monthly. That alone is about $400. Add weekly checkups for the first month, then bi-weekly after that. Plus, she needs nutritious food, vitamins, and supplements. I would estimate around $700 a month for the first 3 months, then it should decrease as she improves. The sum was substantial, but Marcus did not hesitate. "I will cover it. Whatever she needs." Dr. Ramirez raised his eyebrows. "Marcus, that is very generous, but that is a lot of money over several months. Are you sure?" Marcus looked through the doorway at Daniel, who was gently adjusting his mother's blanket, his small face serious with concentration. "I am absolutely sure. Some things are worth more than money." Dr. Ramirez smiled and patted Marcus on the shoulder. "You always had a good heart, even back when your son and I served together. I will check on her weekly at no additional charge. That is my contribution to this cause." Marcus thanked him, feeling grateful for the doctor's kindness. Together, they returned to the small bedroom. Dr. Ramirez explained the treatment plan to Maria and Daniel, making sure they understood how to administer the medication properly before leaving. The doctor left his phone number and told them to call immediately if Maria's condition worsened. He also left some vitamin supplements and protein powder to help with the malnutrition. Daniel walked the doctor to the door, thanking him repeatedly in his polite, earnest way. When the doctor left, Daniel returned to Marcus, his eyes shining with emotion. "Sir, I do not have the words to thank you properly. You have saved my mother's life." Marcus placed his hand on Daniel's head affectionately. "You saved her life, Daniel. Your love and determination brought me to you. You refused to give up. That is real courage," Maria called out weakly from the bed. "Captain Marcus, please come here." Marcus approached, and Maria reached out to take his hand. Her grip was weak but sincere. "I do not understand why you are doing this for us. We are strangers to you. But I want you to know that as long as I live, I will never forget your kindness. Neither will my son. You have given us hope when we had none left." Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon with Daniel and Maria. He went to the nearby market and returned with bags of fresh groceries, including fruits, vegetables, meat, rice, and bread. Daniel's eyes widened at the sight of so much food. Marcus could tell it had been a long time since they had eaten properly. He helped Daniel put everything away in the small kitchen, showing him how to organize things to make them last. He also left several $100s in cash, tucked into an envelope on the counter. Before leaving, Marcus wrote down his phone number on a piece of paper and gave it to Daniel. "You call me if you need anything. I mean anything at all. If your mother's condition changes, if you run out of food, if you have any problems. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded solemnly, carefully folding the paper and putting it in his pocket like it was made of gold. "I understand, sir. Thank you for everything." Marcus finally returned to the palace late in the afternoon. He knew he was in trouble the moment he walked through the gates. The commanding officer, Colonel Stevens, was waiting for him in the guard office. The colonel was a stern man with iron-gray hair and a reputation for strict discipline. "Captain Marcus, my office." "Now," he said curtly. Marcus followed him inside, standing at attention as the door closed behind them. Colonel Stevens sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. "You abandoned your post for over 6 hours without proper authorization. You left your fellow guards to cover for you. You broke protocol in front of tourists and media. Do you have any idea how many people recorded video of you kneeling beside that street child? It is all over social media. The palace administration is asking questions. What do you have to say for yourself? Marcus stood straight, his voice steady. Sir, I understand I broke protocol. I accept full responsibility for my actions. I am prepared to face whatever consequences you deem appropriate. However, I want to be clear that I would do the same thing again without hesitation. That boy needed help. His mother was dying. Sometimes our duty as human beings must come before our duty as guards. The colonel was silent for a long moment, studying Marcus's face. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. You know what the worst part of this is, Marcus? I cannot even properly punish you. Do you know why? Marcus shook his head slightly. No, sir. The colonel turned his computer monitor around. On the screen was a news article with the headline, Royal Guard shows true meaning of service. Below it were photos and videos from the morning, showing Marcus kneeling beside Daniel, then walking with him through the city. Colonel Stevens scrolled through more articles. They were everywhere. Major news outlets, social media platforms, international press. The story had spread like wildfire. People around the world were praising Marcus's actions. Comments flooded in from thousands of people sharing their own stories of struggling to afford medical care, feeling invisible and helpless in society. Marcus had become a symbol of compassion in a world that often seemed cold and uncaring.
Ow.
The palace received over 50,000 messages today, the colonel continued. Most of them are praising you. Some are criticizing the royal family for having guards who stand around doing nothing while citizens suffer. It has become a public relations nightmare and a public relations triumph at the same time. The king himself asked to speak with you tomorrow morning. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The king wants to see me. Colonel Stevens nodded. At 10 o'clock sharp, I suggest you polish your uniform and prepare to explain yourself to the highest authority in the land. That evening, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in his mind. He thought about Daniel's face, full of desperate hope. He thought about Maria's weak gratitude. He thought about the choice he had made to break 15 years of perfect protocol. He knew he might lose his job tomorrow. The king could decide to make an example of him. But even with that possibility hanging over him, Marcus felt at peace. He had done the right thing. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the palace 2 hours early. He meticulously prepared his uniform, making sure every button gleamed and every crease was perfect. At exactly 10 o'clock, he was escorted to the king's private office, a place he had never been before. The room was elegant but not ostentatious, filled with books and historical artifacts. Behind a large wooden desk sat King Alexander, a man in his 60s with wise eyes and a thoughtful expression. Captain Marcus, please sit down, the king said, gesturing to a chair. Marcus sat carefully, his back straight, his hands folded in his lap. The king studied him for a moment before speaking. I have read all the reports about yesterday's events. I have watched the videos. I have read thousands of messages from citizens. Now I want to hear your version directly from you. Tell me what happened and why you made the choices you did. Marcus took a deep breath and told the entire story, leaving nothing out. He described Daniel's appearance at the palace gates, his plea for help, his willingness to be arrested if it meant his mother could be saved. He explained his own internal struggle, the moment of decision, and everything that followed. The king listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful and attentive. When Marcus finished, there was a long silence. Finally, the king spoke. Captain Marcus, do you know the true meaning of royal service? Marcus hesitated. I thought I did, Your Majesty. I believed it meant unwavering discipline, perfect protocol, and protection of the crown. The king shook his head slowly. Those things are important, yes, but they are not the true meaning. The crown exists to serve the people, not the other way around. A guard who stands rigidly at his post while a child suffers is not serving the kingdom. He is serving his own pride and fear. The king stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace grounds. What you did yesterday reminded this entire nation of something we have forgotten. Power and position mean nothing if we do not use them to help those who cannot help themselves. You broke protocol. Yes. but you upheld something far more important. You upheld the values that this kingdom was supposed to be founded on: compassion, justice, human dignity. Marcus felt emotion rising in his throat, but maintained his composure. The king turned back to face him. "I am not going to punish you, Captain Marcus. Instead, I am going to promote you. As of today, you are being appointed as the new Director of Community Outreach for the Royal Guard. Your job will be to create a program that connects guards with citizens who need help. You will have a budget, a staff, and the full support of the Crown." Marcus's eyes widened in shock. "Your Majesty, I do not know what to say. I never expected this." The king smiled. "I imagine you did not expect any of this when you woke up yesterday morning. But sometimes the most important moments in life come when we least expect them. You saw a child in need and you chose compassion over convenience. That is the kind of leadership this kingdom needs. Now I want to meet this remarkable boy and his mother. Can you arrange that?" 2 days later, a royal car pulled up outside the modest apartment building where Daniel and Maria lived. Neighbors peered from windows, curious about the unusual sight. Marcus emerged from the car, dressed in his finest uniform. He climbed the familiar stairs and knocked gently on the door. Daniel opened it, his face lighting up when he saw Marcus. The boy had cleaned himself up and was wearing his best clothes, though they were still worn and patched. "Captain Marcus, my mother is doing better. The medicine is working," Daniel said excitedly. Marcus smiled and ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. "That is wonderful news, Daniel. I have something to tell you and your mother. May I come in?" Daniel stepped aside and Marcus entered the small apartment. Maria was sitting up in bed, looking considerably better than she had 2 days ago. Her face had more color, and her eyes were brighter. Marcus explained about the king's decision and the invitation to visit the palace. Maria's hand flew to her mouth in shock. "The king wants to meet us? But why? We are nobody special." Marcus shook his head firmly. "You are very special. Your son's courage has inspired an entire nation. People everywhere are talking about what happened. You should see the messages pouring in. Families are sharing their own stories. People are starting to help their neighbors. You both have started something important." An hour later, they arrived at the palace. Daniel pressed his nose against the car window, eyes wide with wonder at the magnificent building and carefully maintained gardens. Palace staff greeted them warmly and escorted them to a comfortable sitting room. Daniel held his mother's hand tightly, nervous but excited. Maria sat carefully in an ornate chair, looking around with disbelief at the elegant surroundings. When King Alexander entered the room, both Daniel and Maria tried to stand and bow, but the king quickly gestured for them to remain seated. "Please, no formalities. You are guests here, not subjects." He pulled up a chair and sat across from them, his manner warm and approachable. "Daniel, I have heard about your brave journey to the palace gates. You did something remarkable. You reminded all of us what true courage looks like." Daniel looked down shyly, his cheeks reddening. "I was just trying to help my mother, Your Majesty. I did not mean to cause any trouble or make a big fuss." The king smiled gently. "You caused exactly the right kind of trouble. Sometimes we need someone brave enough to break the silence and show us what really matters. Tell me, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "I want to be a doctor, sir, so that I can help people like my mother, so that no one has to choose between food and medicine." The king nodded approvingly. "That is a noble dream. I think you would make an excellent doctor. In fact, I would like to help make that dream come true." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Maria. "Inside, you will find a scholarship fund established in Daniel's name. It will cover his education from now through medical school, including all expenses." Maria opened the envelope with trembling hands. When she saw the documents inside, tears began streaming down her face. "Your Majesty, this is too much. We cannot accept such generosity." The king leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "You can, and you will. But this is not charity. This is an investment in someone who has already proven he has the heart of a healer." Daniel cared more about his mother's welfare than his own safety. That kind of selfless love is exactly what we need in medicine. He turned to Daniel. There is one condition, though. When you become a doctor, I want you to promise that you will never forget where you came from, that you will always remember what it feels like to need help and have nowhere to turn, that you will treat every patient with the same love you showed your mother. Daniel nodded solemnly, his young face serious with the weight of the promise. I promise, Your Majesty. I will never forget. I will help everyone I can, no matter who they are. The king then addressed Maria. Mrs. Santos, I understand you were a seamstress before your illness. When you have fully recovered, if you wish to work again, we have a position for you in the Palace Textile Workshop. The hours are reasonable, the pay is fair, and you will have full medical benefits. But that is only if you want to work. Your immediate priority should be getting healthy. Maria could barely speak through her tears. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you so much. I do not deserve this kindness. King Alexander shook his head. You deserve dignity, security, and hope. Every citizen of this kingdom deserves those things. That is what Captain Marcus helped me remember. Now, I have one more announcement to make. He gestured to Marcus, who stepped forward. Captain Marcus is creating a new program called the Guardian Angel Initiative. Royal Guards will be trained not just in security and protocol, but in community service and outreach. They will work with social services to identify families in need and connect them with resources. The king continued, his voice filled with conviction. Every guard will spend part of their duty time in the communities they serve, building relationships, understanding struggles, and offering help. We are also establishing a royal emergency fund that citizens can apply to for medical care, housing assistance, and education. Daniel, your brave act at the palace gates has changed how this kingdom operates. You showed us that walls and protocols should never separate us from the people we are meant to serve. Over the following weeks, Maria's health steadily improved. The consistent medication, proper nutrition, and regular medical care worked wonders. Color returned to her cheeks, strength returned to her body, and hope returned to her spirit. Daniel continued his education, now attending a better school, closer to their new apartment. Yes, the king had also arranged for them to move into a safe, comfortable home in a better neighborhood, with proper heating, running water, and windows that let in sunlight. Marcus visited them regularly. Forming a bond that went beyond his initial act of kindness, he became like an uncle to Daniel, attending school events and celebrating small victories. He taught Daniel about honor, service, and the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Daniel absorbed these lessons eagerly, his young mind shaped by the extraordinary turn his life had taken. The Guardian Angel Initiative launched 3 months later with tremendous public support. Guards received training in social work basics, first aid, crisis intervention, and community relations. They partnered with local organizations to create networks of support throughout the kingdom. Stories began emerging of guards helping homeless families find shelter, assisting elderly citizens with health care needs, and mentoring troubled youth. The culture of the Royal Guard shifted from distant authority to engaged service. Daniel's story became part of the training program. New recruits watched the video of that morning at the palace gates, of a small boy kneeling on stone steps, begging for help. They studied Marcus's decision to break protocol, and they discussed the deeper meaning of duty. The lesson was clear. Rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. When protocols conflict with human compassion, compassion must win. A year after that fateful morning, Daniel stood on the palace steps during a ceremony honoring community heroes. He had grown taller, his face fuller and healthier. Beside him stood his mother, completely recovered and now working happily in the Palace Textile Workshop. Marcus stood with them in his new uniform as Director of Community Outreach, his chest decorated with a medal for distinguished service. The king addressed the gathered crowd, which included media from around the world. A year ago, a young boy taught us all a powerful lesson. He showed us that true nobility has nothing to do with titles or wealth. It has everything to do with love, courage, and the willingness to fight for those who matter most. Daniel's bravery, combined with Captain Marcus's compassion, sparked a movement that has transformed this kingdom. We have helped over 5,000 families this year through the Guardian Angel Initiative. We have reconnected our institutions with the people they serve. He looked down at Daniel with genuine affection. This young man will grow up to be a doctor. He will save lives with his skills and knowledge. But he has already saved something equally important. He saved our collective conscience. He reminded us that every person matters, that every cry for help deserves an answer, and that the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Daniel stood quietly, still shy despite all the attention, holding his mother's hand. Later that evening, as the sun set over the palace, Marcus and Daniel sat together on a bench in the gardens. The boy looked up at the man who had changed his life. "Captain Marcus, do you ever regret breaking the rules that day?" Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "No, Daniel. Not for a single moment. I spent 15 years following every rule perfectly, and I was proud of that. But in one morning, you taught me that sometimes the greatest act of service is knowing when to break formation and kneel beside someone who needs help." Daniel smiled, then said thoughtfully, "When I become a doctor, I want to be like you. I want to see people really see them, not just their symptoms or problems. I want to remember that behind every illness is a person with hopes and fears and people who love them." Marcus put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "You will be a wonderful doctor, Daniel. And you know what? You already are a healer. You healed something broken in me that day. You reminded me why I became a guard in the first place." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the city. Thousands of lives being lived, each one precious and important. Somewhere out there, other children faced struggles and hardships. But now, because of one boy's courage and one guard's compassion, there was a system in place to help them. There were people watching, listening, ready to respond when someone needed assistance. Daniel thought about his journey from desperate street child to scholarship student. He thought about that morning when he had walked to the palace, prepared to sacrifice his freedom for his mother's life. He had been terrified, but determined, driven by love stronger than fear. He had not known if anyone would help, but he had tried anyway. And that decision to try, despite the odds, had changed everything. It had changed his life, his mother's life, Captain Marcus's life. And in some small but significant way, it had changed an entire kingdom's understanding of what it meant to serve and protect. As darkness settled over the palace grounds and lights began twinkling in windows across the city, both Daniel and Marcus understood a profound truth. Sometimes the smallest act of courage can create ripples that spread far beyond anything we can imagine. Sometimes one person's desperate plea and another person's compassionate response can reshape the world around them. And sometimes the most important moment in life comes when we choose to kneel beside someone in need, rather than stand rigidly at attention, following rules that have forgotten their purpose.